Hello and welcome to the webinar, sponsored by Lytx. I'm Jim Luff for Bobbitt Business Media and Automotive Fleet Magazine. Our webinar today focuses on safety. Safety is not a game. You'll hear from 5 experts in driver safety, teaching you how to deliver real coaching and achieve real results in 2025. This webinar includes interactive participation from you. I'll be throwing out some surveys and asking you to provide real data using the chat function. Your input is extremely valuable and adds more takeaway value to those who are listening in today through your participation. So let's get on to our first survey. Which of the following best describes how your fleet currently uses video in your operations? And you'll see the survey tab there at the top that says surveys. And go ahead and tell us whether you're primarily using video safety or using video telematics or actively using both options. And while you're putting in your answers, you'll be hearing from Jeff McKinney, Vice President of Safety at Jetco Delivery, Meredith Priestley, Vice President and General Counsel for Cargo Transporters, and Kevin Kilner, Chief Safety Officer at Beacon Mobility. You'll also hear from Jeff Martin, who is the Vice President of Global Sales Strategy for Lytx, who will moderate the webinar and also show you some proven results and then wrap up our webinar with some key takeaways. We will conclude with some open discussion as well as a Q&A session. So here's the speakers, their faces, so you know who's talking. And now let's move on to Jeff McKinney. And Jeff, I should point out, is the recipient of the Truckload Carriers Association's Safety Professional of the Year for 2024. Jeff?
All right. Well, thank you, Jim, and welcome, everybody. Wanted to talk to you guys about, some of the best practices we do here in Jetco. And I was going to start off with the drivers and respect with drivers. Way back when I drove many years ago, it almost like it was cats and dogs between operations and drivers. And, now we have the newer drivers. They're a little bit different than some of the baby boomers where I'm at. And so we had to change the way we look at things and the way we communicate to our drivers. And one of the biggest things we've done was make sure that we talk to our drivers, not talk at. And when we talk to them, we start that conversation. It eases up the tension between safety, operations, drivers, or whatnot. And then we have to get them involved. When we put in Lytx, and I run Lytx throughout our company, we put that into a small group of drivers, let them test out the Lytx cameras back in, I'm guessing around about 2008, 2009, and let them sell it. It wasn't me. It wasn't operations. It was peer to peer. Let them see what's going on. It went through. Yes. Did we have problems? Yes. 5 drivers. Out of the 5 drivers, 1 stayed with us, and it's normal behavior. They thought it was Big Brother, and they learned it wasn't. And on the first week of installation, our return of investment came back at us. I mean, we got it in one, I hate saying it, one crash, and that video saved that driver. It exonerated the driver. If we didn't have the video, that driver would have been cited for a rear end accident. And it put a young lady and a 1-year-old in the hospital. But we had the cameras. So that right there sold it very, very quickly to the rest of the drivers. And it takes away from the stereotype that we keep seeing sometimes on the road, where the officers and other people, society says it's the truck driver, they're smoking and abandoned on the road. And it's not. We have the videos where we can see that, we can show the driver, and we can exonerate the driver and say, hey, look, see what you're doing? You did it the right way. and be positive. I try not to bring all the negative out, but you got to put some positive in there. So reinforcing that, communicating with these guys. And here's a big one that I have is see it, say it, do it. If the driver sees it, they say, hey, look, I see what I did. Now, what are you going to do? And it comes over so much easier. You know, back in 2011, Jetco started a culture. Now, we had to build a culture. We didn't have one, you know, and everybody says, I have a safety culture. Well, do you? And we brought everybody in, and we just put everybody together. And we get drivers, we had operations, we had executives. Drivers, you can't go sit with your buddy. You're going to go sit with an operation and an executive. Shop, you're going to go sit with a driver, an executive, and whatnot. And we split them all up and says, hey, where do we need to go? Where do we see ourselves? And we kind of stole something. Jeff is going to know this. From Waste Management, they had a M2Z, Mission to Zero. And we had a young man, that came in and helped us out. And we came up with driving to perfection. Will we ever hit perfection? Probably not. But what's to say that we cannot keep striving to perfection every single day? And when we learned and got into the culture, D2P, the safety department, that's the entire company. My group have about 3 or 4 people in my safety group and compliance, but really the operations, the drivers, accounting, everybody is my safety department. And they've taken this culture and they've taken D2P, and it's our DNA. It is our value. So getting that culture and getting the buy-in from everybody, communicating, it all works together, but it's not one of these things that you can do overnight. It took us probably, I would say, 3 or 4 years for it to really catch on. It's not an overnight. So you have to keep doing it, and you got to make sure that it falls from the top to the bottom, not from the bottom up trying to crawl your way up. So it has to be from the top to the bottom.
I love those comments, Jeff.
Yeah.
I love hearing about how you built the culture, and that you shared that it's not something that can happen overnight. Cultures are not, they're not created overnight. And the fact that you put this effort into it really, really is truly amazing. Let's take a little break here and check out the surveys and see what's going on here. We have one user who is primarily using safety video. We have 0 users primarily using video telematics. And we have 10 users who are doing both options, and 10 users using both options, and 2 users not currently using any video solutions. So I'm glad those 2 users joined us here, because we've got plenty to share. As we move on, Mike Pelez was to join us today, but unfortunately was unable to be here due to an emergency. So I am going to pass this over to Jeff Martin to speak on behalf of this slide. And Jeff Martin, can you talk to us about self-coaching apps and maybe even the use of AI and how to eliminate accidents?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's really important. Obviously, if you could please advance the slide back. And first of all, Mike was going to be with us today, but unfortunately had an emergency to tend to, and Mike's a terrific fella, and he'll be back with us for another webinar next time. So happy to step in for him. I'm going to do my best to convey some of his strong thoughts. And I think one of the big takeaways in talking with Mike was that coaching is a craft. And some of the things that he really felt were important is that, self-coaching apps are effective, but they're just not enough. And I think Jeff brought that out. Obviously they're preferred by some of the over the road or maybe company provided tablets or phones. But the fact of the matter is, in a recent survey of what drivers want, they prefer personal engagement. So self-coaching apps are awesome, absolutely awesome. But if you're going to do that, there still could be that healthy combination. So where you couple it with engagement. And in doing that, it provides you great opportunity to show appreciation and recognition when it's earned. Besides, continuous improvement. With regards to, overall fleet safety in that respect that Jeff mentioned, I think the big other thing is that, that spirit of seeking to understand before being understood. There's a lot we can all learn by listening to the front line. They have the answers, and sometimes we just stop and listen. We might be surprised. And that's one thing I've learned in my growth as a leader. The more I listened, the better I got, because the better decisions we as a team made and then we ultimately executed. I think it also promotes teamwork with that respect and professionalism, and certainly renders greater results. Well, with regards to AI, you know what? Hey, we all want the next level. We need to uncover that additional risk. Fatigue is a great example. Right now, we're piloting right now and hope to release sometime in 25. Our AI detected drowsy, so immediate alert to the driver. And that's one thing that we're really excited about. It puts not only drivers in a winning position, but helps folks better manage the overall health, well-being, nutrition, etc., of their driver force and technicians. And it also provides, at the end of the day, not big data, but best data, actionable data where you can absolutely go after the right things for the right reasons at the right time with the right people. Because look, we all know that those supervisors and managers on the front line, they only got so much time. So putting them in a winning position really has to help, for the organization to sharpen the saw, so to speak, on their focus for continuous improvement. And as far as overall, opportunities, maximizing ROI, I can't say enough about that. In my prior experience at WM, and there's a lot of the folks on this call right now are doing it too. It's as we all know, especially for our audience, our attendees, when you crack that safety nut, you start making great strides in the culture. Guess what else starts happening? Better efficiencies, productivity, better fleet maintenance, better retention, better customer service. And it's just a total value realization, and it's no secret what it really starts with.
That's definitely a whole lot of betterment right there. I appreciate that. And while we regret that Mike wasn't able to join us, Jeff Martin is one of the leading authorities on safety in this industry, and we're happy to have you step in to fill that slide. Let's go ahead and do another survey. What aspect of fleet safety do you feel is most overlooked? Remember, folks, this is an interactive audience participation. We want to know if it's coaching, data analytics, or real-time monitoring. Please fill out the survey. And while you're doing that, we are going to move on to Meredith Priestley, Vice President and General Counsel for Cargo Transporters. Meredith, can you speak to the importance of documenting, coaching, and the use of real-time data and due diligence?
Yes. Hi, everyone. Welcome. So I'm going to start with documentation because we are talking about just coaching. And from a legal perspective, obviously, and an HR perspective, documentation is key. But I always tell our coaches to keep it simple. You don't want to put a lot of emotion in your documentation. So just to show that you've coached the event on a certain behavior or whatever you're addressing, you just want to keep it simple and say coached on following distance, and maybe 2 sentences or even 1 sentence. That's just better for litigation purposes when you don't have the back and forth in that documentation. So that's what I would recommend from that. But if you document your coaching, and it's easy to do in the Lytx system and probably any system you have if you use a LMS or anything like that, you just type it into the event and you have your coaches, and you want to have, and you can actually go in and look and see if your coaches are documenting, are they putting notes in there and things like that. And you want to have about 100% of that. So you have the documentation that it's being coached, and you can show that you are documenting and you're coaching. That will show in litigation that you're coaching. So to go to kind of the next bullet point about your real-time data supports driver exoneration, this has been a game changer for us. It used to be, we've had cameras since 2012, And it used to be that we had to wait for the event to come in. It took a little bit, but now with the new technology and the MVAI, we can get a triggered event almost instantaneously, even while safety's on the phone with the driver at the scene. And then also, if you have the DVR capability, you can go in and find the event. And we've used it. I know we had a lot of concern at first, and we would kind of wait and say, oh, we're going to not share our video. We're going to wait till it was subpoenaed. We're going to have a protective order in place. And that is kind of a legal perspective. And we always try to protect everything. But we also have to remember, and we have changed in this regard, that it does exonerate the driver. And if we can show the officer on the scene, we will do that. And so we've become a little bit more, I would say, open with that. And we will even have our safety department do a FaceTime with an investigating officer and show him. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, that's all I needed. And it'll get the report written correctly. And as we know with insurance companies and when you're fighting claims, sometimes they'll just like say, well, the report doesn't say that, so we're not going to do anything about it. So having that report written correctly is key to some claims. Sometimes it doesn't matter, sometimes it does, but to get it correctly written is obviously a positive in any claim. So that's the real-time data that can support our exoneration, and obviously we want that as fast as we can. Your due diligence in monitoring and correction. As we know, due diligence is just making sure you're observing and looking at your processes and making sure that they're working. And so I always say coaches need training as well. Sometimes we forget about that, and we are just, doing our coaching on the drivers, and we're always thinking our drivers need training or they need education, but coaches need training as well. So it's good to keep that in mind as a due diligence and make sure, hey, we're helping our coaches coach. And Lytics has support in the support center, great videos. It gives them advice if someone's not being able to change a behavior for a certain driver. It'll give them pointers. So I would just throw that out there. But when you're monitoring something, also you want to look at the whole picture of your fleet and look at your high risk. That's, the data that we have. And as I've always said, if you have data and you're not using it, sometimes that's going to come back and bite you in litigation or in another circumstance. So you want to look at your high-risk drivers and basically monitor them. And if they're not coming down off that list, then if they're not being corrected, then sometimes you have to make the decision to move them out because they're not, conforming to your culture. So I'll go to my last bullet point about coaching ensures compliance and reduces liability. And it kind of ties in with what I just said. But as Jeff mentioned earlier, you want to have that relationship with the coach. It is an adult-to-adult conversation. They form trust with that person. They know them in and out. And so if they're trusting of their coach and they're learning and they're changing behaviors, then they're going to be more compliant. And so obviously, in turn, that's going to reduce your liability.
Hey, Meredith, those are some great points. And, one thing that came to mind as you're talking, with regards to monitoring and correcting and working with the drivers for continuous improvement, I think of a lot of companies that's one of the better practices catching on or what everyone's terming boot camps, where on a Saturday or an off day or any particular day where they bring in a number of drivers who are managers who are having trouble with, for example, following distance. What is following distance? What does that look like? And picking out 3 or 4 key behaviors to try to really knock out of their risk factor. Just something that seems to be catching a lot of popularity, I guess, right now in the industry.
Anybody else have any comments before we move on?
Yeah, I'd like to jump in when Meredith was talking about the crash scene. Just kind of like a standard operating procedure we do here at Jetco is I try to go out to every crash scene. If not, I'm sending an adjuster. But that adjuster he or she already has the video. I grabbed the video from the crash, and we have it there for the officer to see, because again, I'm going to go back to where I said, everybody thinks truck drivers, the smoky and abandoned, they're just running everybody off the road, and it's not that case. And we've run into many times where insurance fraud, and people pull out in front of you, slam on the brakes, or do something to cause a crash. And I have one video of that, it exonerated the driver. So, best practice, use those videos. Make sure your counsel knows what you're doing, but it's going to save you. And it's also going to sit there and make the drivers buying a lot more, saying, hey, this video is my savior. And they're going out to their POVs and buying Garmin or whatnot outside for their, personal vehicles. So it's a good behavior change right there that camera is creating.
Great advice, Jeff.
We'll send them to adjusters too. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Oh, no, go ahead, Meredith.
Oh, I was just going to say, we'll send them, if we can't get on the scene, or if it's one of those truck stop instances and things like that, the insurance carrier that we may be trying to get our damages from, we'll send them over to that, because, they won't believe us. Basically, they're like, we didn't hit y'all. So we have to send them all the time now. They basically, it's kind of becoming a norm.
Yeah. So subrogation is another great benefit.
Let's take a look at those.
Okay,
go ahead.
Sorry.
We're running a little behind.
I know the billboards that you see all over the place, the commercials, it's hurting them. I'll tell you that right now. It's hurting these gentlemen and women and these corporations that this group of attorneys that are trying to get one. The videos are saving us.
I love it. I love it. So in terms of what our audience thinks the safety, the component that's most overlooked is coaching by 71%. I also love that Meredith talked about coaching the coach. That's very important. Data analytics, 21.43% believe that's overlooked, and real-time monitoring, 7% believe that is overlooked. So moving on past the survey results, let's move on to Kevin. He is Chief Safety Officer for Beacon Mobility. Kevin, let's talk about data-driven coaching and real-time coaching, along with any other tips you'd like to share with our audience.
Yeah. Everybody's done a great job sharing some best practices already today. And I'll tell you that the starting point for us before we can get into data-driven or real-time coaching has to start with driver appreciation. Now, let me be very clear what that means to us. It means I appreciate that my driver is a human being. It means I appreciate that my driver is therefore flawed, right? And when we look at how we approach our industries, and we really need perfect performance from our drivers, especially in intersections where there's pedestrians, but they're human beings, and it's impossible for them to be perfect, right? So if we start with an acceptance of that, then we can apply coaching models, and we can apply real-time coaching. What we like to call our driver athletes, we like to call it the in-helmet play calling, right? Just like maybe you saw that phenomenal game that Pittsburgh played this week. I know you're all Steelers fans. It's like when you watch a quarterback come up to the line and all of a sudden he'll back up, or he'll change their lineup, or he'll call a timeout. A lot of that is because of coaching, in-helmet messages being delivered in real time. So we tell our drivers that this is what DriveCam is for you. We're giving you alerts. We don't expect you to be perfect. So when your following distance gets maybe a little too close, just open it up when you get that real-time coaching. Now, data-driven support, we can talk all day long about being able to identify specific behaviors, or being able to identify specific groups or people or locations or whatever it is. I'll tell you, the thing we probably don't talk enough about is how those data-driven results will make it very clear to you whether or not, let's just say, your training program Is your training program working or not? Because maybe that's the problem. Or your data-driven results will make it very clear if it's a driver, right? That's easy to wrap your head around. But what about the management team? Because if you've got multiple locations or you've got multiple managers with different groups of drivers and everybody else's drivers are responding great, but this one leader, this supervisor, manager's drivers aren't, then that person might be the problem. So the data-driven decisions really goes to what Meredith was saying on coaching the coaches. It makes it so easy to identify where your problem is and then take appropriate action, provided you accept that not only are your drivers humans, but so are your managers. So let's meet them in the middle too, right? And nobody wakes up in the morning and goes to work and says, man, today's the day I'm going to blow it. I've been waiting for this moment, right? But sometimes we get it wrong. And that's where DriveCam can come in and help in those moments, accepting that people are human and give them that coaching. From a measurable results perspective, I mean, it's so easy to see my risk score is going up or my risk score is going down. And this behavior is going up or this behavior is going down, or this coaching effectiveness going up, going like whatever it is. It's so easy to see measurable results on that, but some high level kind of ROI results that you may be interested in is I don't want to share my exact numbers because you'll never be able to achieve it. And because we're that good, right? Like, well, I may have a former colleague that I know is on the line, and she taught me everything I know. So I just want to throw a little friendly challenge out, but far greater than a 50% reduction in AL claims is where we are. And we've really had DriveCam in our organization rolled out for about 18 months. So within a year and a half, 50% reduction in claims. The significant reductions in our risk score, and we do use the full AI portfolio. We identify every behavior live as it is. And we've had significant reductions. Again, if I shared with how large the reductions were, you may not be able to achieve it, but I'll tell you, it makes me sleep well at night.
I definitely imagine seeing measurable improvements offers some level of satisfaction of improvement of your operations, and
absolutely,
both for management and the drivers themselves.
And just the last thing real quick I want to touch on, everybody else mentioned exoneration, but the thing that they didn't talk about, team, on a return on investment is the retention, the employee retention you're able to capture because of the exoneration.
Yep.
And that's a huge return on investment.
Yeah. That's a great point, because unfortunately, it's like horse trading. We're back and forth trying to resurrect people. And when we start really investing in them and investing in the coaches, as Meredith was saying, it really starts to build a great trust factor, and ultimately an organization that is not only safe, but they're providing great services, customer service, and great efficiencies, but most importantly, doing it safely.
All right, let's take another survey. And while I post this survey, I also want to let everyone know, if you have questions, you can go ahead and post them right here. And when we get to the Q&A session, we'll do our best to answer all of the questions. We do have a couple that are already there, but I encourage you to ask questions. Survey number 3, what safety metric are you most focused on improving in 2025? Is it accident reductions, driver behavior scores, compliance rates, or a return on investment from safety programs? Go ahead and put your answers into that survey right there, and we will review those in just a second. Give you time to put them in. Slide number 11, let's take a look at what proven results look like. And I'm going to ask Jeff Martin to explain this graph to us. Jeff, go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. And look, this is a great story of where in the first 12 months, there was really no coaching. But as you can see, pretty good progress to start out for sure. And you just heard the great story from Kevin and the tremendous work that the team's doing there. But boy, when you start to accelerate to get to that next level with coaching itself on that second half, it does make a difference. but because there's approximately three times more risk without coaching. We know that because of the almost 1.2 million units that we have deployed throughout the world, because we're able to see real life data through our Lytics lab. We monitor it hourly, second by second, you might say. And you know what? Some people might be saying out there, gosh, I don't know if I have that bandwidth for my frontline managers to coach. Well, when you look at the average of coaches for 7 minutes, you might say, boy, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But for those locations, those customers that are really doing well, it really comes out to about 35 video events a month. And when you think about maybe a 21, 22 day work week, maybe that comes out to about 2 a day. So it's really not that much. Now, granted, that's where you get to, but that's the beauty about configurability and coaching to the groups and not to the individual and then to the individual. There's certain things you can do to put your team in a winning position when it comes to deploying video safety and telematics into your organization. But as you can see here, great opportunities to eliminate risk. Next, Jim.
All right, let's take a look at that survey. What safety metric are you most focused on improving in 2025? 46.67% say driver behavior scores. Next top is 26.67 with accident reduction, 6.67% compliance rates, and 20% are focused on improving ROI from safety programs. So you've joined the right webinar for that, for sure. And Jeff, I'm gonna turn it back to you again to ask you to review the key takeaways and strategies that have been shared by our panelists today.
Sure. Jim, let me first tell, on behalf of my colleagues and Jim and the rest of the folks, express our gratitude and appreciation for the folks attending today's webinar. I think everybody here has probably got a great heart for and passion for safety. It takes special people to do this and to lead safety and be engaged with it. And as such, we're going to be sending 2 ebooks to 2 different ones, one on driver-centric coaching and recognition, and another one based on recognition and appreciation. We'll be sending those out to each of the attendees today, both of those ebooks. So please be on the lookout hereafter. Key takeaways. Leadership isn't for everyone, as you heard the team mentioned earlier. Not everyone is absolutely meant for it, but you know what? It doesn't mean we can't help improve them in their leadership and that craft of coaching. But the key is recognize who is our most help needed managers and or drivers. That's the key. And safety, obviously, means everything about removing risk. When we really focus on what are those 8 or 10 behaviors that are really driving our frequency and severity, you start to make monumental changes in your organization. I think one of the beautiful things about an opportunity for today for us is exchanging ideas and contributing, but also stealing shamelessly. As we all know, there's a lot of great SOPs and best practices, and I think everybody hopefully will come away with some one new idea today, perhaps to consider as they build it, really their 2025 plan and make it actionable. I think the one thing that, as I mentioned earlier, in my opinion, it's not big data, it's best data, and it's got to be actionable, but it's also got to be reasonable and achievable for those frontline folks. And I think the other part is that when you pick your crown metrics, as Kevin was mentioning earlier, and those KPIs, et cetera, as you can tell, they're very important to him and they're important to all of us. But when you keep them simple as well, it makes it very digestible for the front line to the top of the boardroom to understand where the company's focused, where you're going, and most importantly, how you're doing. Practical steps for impactful coaching. I mentioned earlier about the boot camps. Well, there's also boot camps for honing their craft of coaching, how to have that consensus building 2-way conversation in which you open it up as showing and appreciating the appreciation that Kevin had mentioned. When you start there and you seek to understand, it seems to make a huge difference in getting that driver's input on what may have been a following too close event or a near collision event, instead of coming at that person, at a fever pitch. And lastly, on the key takeaways, as I say a lot, sadly, there's not a life saved metric. If there was, the folks joining me today and a lot of folks that are on this call today, we all know we've saved lives. And we all wish we could see that. And that's something we need to remember each and every day, even during the tough days, is that, keep the pursuit, keep the spirit, and it'll absolutely make it an opportunity for you and your organization. Equip managers to coach effectively. I think that was well stated by each of our guests today. And again, personal and engaging. I think it pays off tenfold when you can do that, especially at that end for the retention besides the prevention. But also, as we know, we were seeing a lot of organizations that are making great strides in efficiency, productivity, fleet maintenance, and customer service in doing so. In the culture of positive accountability, recognition is huge. Celebrating the wins, celebrating the improvements, especially when it's a group improvement besides an individual, certainly makes a huge difference in the organization. And as we all know, the more we invest into our drivers and those frontline managers, when their growth, the companies grow. And more importantly, they operate safer for everyone, including those folks we're sharing roadways with. So it makes a big difference. Team, any other things that stood out to you today, or any of your personal takeaways?
I had one. I was a little curious. It was mentioned that driver appreciation is certainly something to concern yourself with. And in terms of driver appreciation, are people still doing the Driver of the Year award? And do anybody on the panel feel value in presenting certificates of appreciation or improvement? Is that a thing?
I do some of these driver recognition through the Lytics program. I'll send a certificate out to that particular driver, but I'm also going to plaster it all over email. All of our drivers have a Jetco email, and we send it out that way. And we also have an award every year to a driver and for somebody outside of the driving force called a Driving to Perfection award. So we do have a yearly award that we give out for that culture, and it's something that everybody strives to get, and we all vote on it. Who's that person who has strive harder, and every day it's in their DNA to reach that perfection or reach zero. So we do have something that way. But on the drive cam side, absolutely, I'll see something. We'll see a crash that's happens right in front of us, and that driver does his best to avoid it, does it safely, either helps them or just aborted that crash, and we'll recognize them.
I love that. And I think that's important. We all get a paycheck, but everybody loves a pat on the back and to be recognized. And when we're talking about safety, I think improvements in safety in any measurable amount are good things. We're going to move on to some questions, but before we do, and thank you folks for putting your questions in. We have quite a few to answer for you. Just before we came on air, I heard, Kevin, you shared a story with us that I'd like you to share with the audience. It's a true practical story with well, you go ahead and tell your story.
Yeah, happy to do that. So it's a hypothetical. My attorneys tell me I have to speak in hypotheticals. So hypothetically speaking, there was a driver that had a drowsy event, and it was picked up on drive cam, and through the ability of their tool, it was emailed to a supervisor. The supervisor saw it within minutes and went in, did a live look in, reached out to the location, and had the driver brought in, and they sat down and talked with the driver and learned that driver had just lost their mom and hadn't been able to sleep well at all. So when we talk about driver support, that's what we're talking about, right? Sometimes it might be a behavior we need to support to change. Sometimes it may be a behavior we need to support because it did change and we want it to continue. And sometimes it's a driver that's going through some rough stuff that we're all going to go through at some point in our life, right? But she didn't need to go through it alone, and she didn't need to be stressing herself out and carrying so much burden. We were able to step in, and I'll tell you what, every night since that night, that driver's been going home safely. So I absolutely love how our team responded. And that's the natural culture that will evolve out of whatever you're doing today if you just trust the tool and accept the imperfections and support people in their growth and in their path.
I love that. I mean, what a great compassionate story, and how your company helps your employees. All right, we have a lot of questions, and let's get on to Michelle's question first. As a passenger transportation provider, when you say real-time alerts / coaching, are you using audible alerts from Lytx? Who wants to take that question?
Yeah, well, being a passenger transportation provider myself, Michelle, who may or may not be my favorite mentor I've ever had in my life. Yes, we are using in-cab alerts, but it's a very select group of behaviors. We chose the behaviors that we felt are at highest risk with human to metal contact, or that increase the severity of an event, and you know exactly what I'm talking about. So we only use audible alerts on 4 different events that can have an immediate change and immediate impact in the driver's behavior live in that moment.
All right, next.
Audible alerts too.
Yes.
Anything
else to
we
add?
use audible alerts too. I think it's almost like a self-coaching tool. So they're definitely worth it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and actually,
All right.
we do the same.
Yeah, and I think the one takeaway, Jim, for the folks on the call that aren't familiar, I think it's popular with the drivers because it allows them to self-correct, obviously, in the moment when that alert goes off. And the configurability of that, as Kevin mentioned, you can choose which behaviors, but you can also choose that, hey, say, for example, someone picks up their cell phone, you'll get an alert immediately, and so you put it down, self-correct. But you can, as an organization, can say, you know what, we're going to give people 2 warnings a day, and then the third one is going to be escalated for coaching the next day or 2 days. And so that's the beauty of configurability and utilizing the system to fit your structure and reasonable, achievable coaching.
All right. Our next question is very specific to Jeff, Martin, and Kevin. Do your safety cultures incorporate recognition and awards programs for your drivers? If you do, what kind? I think that just mirrors what I had brought up a moment ago. But go ahead and readdress it. Jeff, Martin.
If I'm understanding correctly, Jim, they're asking about recognition opportunities?
Yeah.
Yes. Do your safety cultures incorporate an awards program?
I can speak to.
Yeah, absolutely. I think today's top companies are figuring out ways and structures in which they have their internal programs, whether it's, no coaching events in a month. They'll have those drivers posted up and with the report and certificates up in the communication centers. Besides providing certificates to the drivers, I think there's obviously tied into whether it's a monthly, quarterly, or annual safety bonus, et cetera, award points, gifts, et cetera, catalog type gifts to select from. But I think the other cool thing is that the Lytx program provides recognition opportunities with certificates and other acknowledgments, but we also then promote through our annual Protect conference, the driver of the year and coach of the year, which companies like my colleagues here can submit their suggested nominees. And it's a great honor because then in turn, for just simply being submitted as an honoree to be considered, they receive recognition gifts from Lytx for the fact that they were elevated from their company. And then, of course, we enjoy a great event in which awards dinner where we celebrate our top drivers and coaches of the year. So that's something that we do to help Lytics clients, celebrate their great strides of their employees.
Beautiful. Meredith, I think you had something to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say we started some positive recognition programs. We used a certificate that's in the Lytics system, but we amped it up and added a T-shirt for the year that says positive recognition on the sleeve. And so we nominate drivers, and it doesn't have to be Lytics. It could be a customer, basically a positive customer review or anything like that for a driver. Or a driver's gone out of his way, but we wrapped it all into like our positive recognition program. But then we also have two that we do called the Cargo Fantasy Challenge and the Lytics Score Challenge. And one of them's around March Madness. And then the other one we just finished up, that's around football season, and that's more of a team aspect, and it gets some competition going and helps, it is still a positive recognition, but it also is, friendly competition and helps focus on risk scores and keeping them at I would say improving them.
All right. Well, thank you for that. And speaking of awards, I don't know if we can call it an award, but all of you that joined us today are going to be getting a special gift. So hang in there. We're going to do a few more questions, and I'll let you know what we're going to be sending to you when this webinar ends. Moving to the next question.
Hey, Jim, real quick, can I interrupt? I just want to show this is another popular thing that's going on. I think a lot of people on the call are probably familiar with the challenge coins. Those seem to be growing in popularity as well, and especially when they're safety based and annually. The collection, the decal on the side of the truck, is really important, and especially for that recognition of their peers.
Yeah, and great advice there, Jeff. I've bought some of those challenge coins myself for a nonprofit that I'm involved in, and it's really a very low, inexpensive piece that really has meaning to those people that receive it. Moving on to the next question, how are technologies like AI dash cameras and telematics driving proactive safety improvements? Jeff Martin, I think that has your name all over it.
Yeah, I think I'd go back to what we talked about earlier with the team is that big data versus best data, and the AI allowing people to self-correct in the moment. It's also uncovering a whole new level of risk that prior to 2020 wasn't discoverable until you had a hard braking event or turning event in which it would trigger a video coaching in which perhaps you have a cell phone in your hand. Now with the AI, when you pick up that cell phone, it's going to give you that opportunity to self-correct in the moment. That's a game changer, obviously, for organizations. I think we've all been through that in the last number of years, but it's exciting. And then there's some pioneering things coming up, like pedestrian detection. It's going to be a new alert along with fatigue detection. That's really going to allow for really the next level of continued pioneering spirit in the industry to help companies continue to improve and eliminate besides identifying risks.
Yeah, and Jeff, I think there's one more thing though that Lytics doesn't take enough credit for, and you really should. Their AI technologies, not only do they give you an immediate assessment, but they do it very consistently and incredibly accurately. And the value in that is better than any driver ride along you'll ever be able to do to scale.
All right, our next question comes from Erica. Erica wants to know, what other retention best practices do you have? I'm going to throw that out first to Jeff McKinney for an answer, and then to Meredith.
Well, the best practices is just a communication. These drivers are very, very smart. If you don't know that, and then you're under the rock. But these guys are very, very smart. I've seen, some C-130 pilots from the Air Force or whatnot come in here, and the best practice is just communicate. Let them see the behavior, because we all have habits that we don't realize and we don't see all the time. It takes a second pair of eyes to see it. And sometimes it just takes that video, one video, to see it and remember, oh, I didn't know I was doing that. To me, bringing that in there, talking to the driver, hey, this is what you're doing. I don't know if you realized it, but every time you turn your head to the left, you were driving to the left and crossing over to the lane. And, when I first put these things in, we had the Big Brother. I haven't heard that probably in the last 5 years since I brought new drivers over here. I have not heard anything bad about cameras. The Big Brother deal, that's gone away because it is spreading out from the industry out onto, you go to a Best Buy or something, look at all the drive cams they have in there and people putting them in their cars. So I think that right there is a good retention because we're exonerating that driver. I'm going to go with Kevin and say we have probably a 75% reduction in preventable accidents. All right. Preventable because of that camera. And that's a good retention tool because now you're not terminating that driver. You're not, the driver is so ticked off at you because he knows what he did or she did, and you're going another way. But now that I have that video, we've had that 75% reduction in preventable. So there's your retention tool right there.
All right, Meredith.
I'll just say ditto to what Jeff said, but
Okay.
coaching's not a one-time effort. It's a process. We do have our driver managers as the coaches. We don't have it separated. So they already have a relationship with that person. And I think, like Jeff said, you're communicating on a day-to-day basis. You have a relationship, you're building trust, you're building accountability. It almost empowers the driver that, he's getting this feedback and he can make changes, and that the relationship will continue and they'll stay if they have a good relationship and they feel heard, and it's adult to adult, not adult to child.
So this seems like a good time to share with you what you folks are going to be getting, because we are talking about retention, and everyone that is watching this recording or this webinar will be sent 2 ebooks about driver-centric and positive recognition to all of the attendees. So that's a gift just for attending the webinar today, and it seemed like a good time to throw that in there. And we have another question. This one is, what obstacles have you encountered when building a safety culture and getting buy-in from drivers and other stakeholders? I'll ask, who wants to take this one?
Sorry.
Go ahead, Meredith, please, go ahead.
My answer is pretty quick. It was, zero resistance from a buy-in perspective from the top down. It was a decision that we were going to do it, and it was all about communicating on how we were going to roll it out. And it, there was maybe only a handful or less, and like Jeff said, the cameras are becoming more, it's a everyday occurrence. They almost want them because it does help them. So the conversations even changed about, hey, don't use your own device. We need you to use ours, type thing, because some of them will have it in there. Even if you don't have a camera, they may have their own.
Well, I think that's smart. It definitely can serve you in litigation purposes when you have a video showing exactly what happened and who did what. So I think that's important. Let's see, we have, I missed a question here from Willie. Willie wants to know, are there any plans in place to include event risk per mile data or crash per mile data within the lytics system? That would be Jeff Martin.
Certainly, it's certainly possible. That's for sure. Our lytics lab, we provide our annual state of the data reports, which provide many insights. That's certainly something that we can look at. If you're a current customer of ours, please reach out. But yes, in general, absolutely.
All right. We have, does Kevin have experience in providing recognition for his drivers? So Kevin, that's your question.
Yeah, for sure. And the way we do it in a large org right now is we leave it to all the locals to come up with whatever they want to do. We give them guidelines, we give them options, we give them guardrails, but we want it to be personal and we want it to be meaningful and we want it to be from that leadership team and not, branded swag or some kind of something else. Now, everything everybody has said, it works. But that team's got to be around it, and that's up to the local leader. So we have locations that do use coins. We have locations that use Starbucks cards, and we have locations that pass coins around driver to driver to really absolutely just saturate the recognition throughout their local cultures. So we do have experience with that, and we do have several different programs working. But from center, we intentionally, at this point, try to let them create whatever that works for them at the location level.
All right. As we finish up here, any last thoughts on gamification versus coaching and positive recognition? I'm throwing that out to anybody.
Yeah, for me, it goes back to what I was just talking about. Gamification is great if you've got a team of people that's what they want, and you create inner competition with one another. Where you don't have that, you might have a different type of driver profile in there that they just want to know their number. What do I need to be below? And I'm just going to keep that to myself and target it. So, but all of that, no matter what it looks like, would be considered gamification, right? It would be considered, in my mind, put the control in the hands of the individual that can actually control it, and keep them engaged and through that mechanism.
All righty. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. It is 2 minutes to the top of the hour. I want to thank all of the panelists for being here today. On behalf of Automotive Fleet and our expert panelist, we thank you for the time that you invested today. We look forward to your participation in the future. And yes, there was a question that this webinar is recorded and you will receive a link via email. Thank you for joining, everyone, and have a nice day.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.